Okay, thank you, Chitra. I hope everyone here can see my screen, and a warm welcome for the for the zTPFGI webinar for this month. The topic is message substitution. I think I'll just go. The agenda for today's call is like I'll just go through a quick PPT, not more than 4 to 5 slides, and then jump on to the demo. I think to start, all of us using zTPFGI, we know about the message run. So basically, using zTPFGI, if you have a script with several inputs or several entries, you can actually run those entries automatically. So that functionality has been there with the product all the time. But most of the time, if you're an application programmer, you will definitely have a lot of variables that you need to change before you trigger the script to run. So like, for example, there might be date and time stamp you want to change, or there might be a ticket number that you want to change in the script. And imagine if the script is about 300, 400 inputs. And if you have multiple, if you have this entry, you have to scan through the file, you have to go and manually change everywhere, wherever this variable data needs to be done. So, but that's a very manual process and it takes a lot of time. So what we have done with the new release, and this functionality is available in 1.2.9.0. So in case if you're working with a customer who has not yet been upgraded, so you will see this functionality being activated once the zTPFGI 1.2.9.0 is rolled out at your workplace, right? So what we have done with this new release is we understand how difficult it is to go through manually and then looking for the variables and changing the data. So we have tried to make it much more easier and then more graphical and also more beneficial to the user. So how is it beneficial in the sense, like suppose I have like 200, 300 entries in an input file, and there are a lot of entries which has date and time. So now I don't have to go and change those manually. So there are scripting that we provide. And when I say scripting, it's not very complicated scripting also. It's more like we are providing a wizard dialog box, which is very easy to follow, just a point and click, and you can choose different types of variables you want to set up in the file, and then you're all done with a few clicks. So we have made it very easy for the programmers to substitute the variables within the input file with lots of. So how exactly this is going to work? Like when we say, okay, we are providing this message substitution, how exactly it's going to work? So basically it's a wizard. Like suppose, let's assume you have an input file about 100 entries. Now you want to set up a variable. So if you are very familiar with the current message run, so all you have to do is you have to go to the message tab and you select the message variables icon under the run option and just say edit message substitution variables. As you see in the screen, there will be a wizard which opens. And now you can say, okay, I want to create a new variable. Just click on new and a small dialog box comes up. Now you can come up with your own variable and then the data what needs to be replaced in case if those variables are hit in the run, right? And then just say okay. And there are also predefined variables that you can choose, like even if it is just a date and time stamp, there are different date and time formats that you might be following within your entries. So we have predefined formats already. So you can just choose the default ones, or you can even customize your formats also. Okay. And most of the times what happens if you are trying to book a ticket or you might give the variable as today's date, but you might want to add or delete a few number of days, plus or minus. So it is also possible, if you are looking at this screen, you can still have the date and time format, and you can have a variable +3 or -3. So that means once we will take today's date and subtract it with with 3 or plus, add it with 3, and then put the value right in when we start running the entries in the TPF. So after the webinar, I just want to show all the screenshots so that if people are watching a recorded session, so they will at least have more information. I'll just quickly go through these slides and then jump straight to the demo. And how do you know that all the variables what you have set up is being reflected in your file? So as soon as you set up a variable, you will see at the beginning on the top of the file, you will see a few comments which automatically is being placed. So in this file, you can notice that there are several variables which we had set up, and then for these are the values which were given when the variables were set up in using the wizard. So this is always visible on the top of the file what you are using. Okay. Now I'll switch to the demo part. Yeah. I hope you are all seeing my zTPFGI screen. I'll connect to a TPS system. Okay, before I jump on to the message substitution, I will just run a simple file. How do we use message run? Let's look at that functionality first, and then we'll come to the variable part. So you can have a file by file name, any file name, but the file type needs to be .input. So this file can reside in your VM, it can reside in your PC, or it can reside in your Linux. It can reside in any directory. But whenever you want to run a script within GI, so you can actually double click on the file. You can actually double click on the file and get the file to the editor. So once you double click and get the file to the editor, and you will notice that when you switch to the message tab, some of the icons are already active. So in this case, I have already signed on to the TPS system. So let me load this file. Okay, when I click on the load, we should not be confusing with this terminology that I'm not loading this file to the TPS. It is just from the zTPFGI perspective, I'm just locking this file. And then and you can notice that as soon as we lock this file, the other icons within the same ribbon are active now. In this case, the step button or the play button or the skip to the cursor, all these buttons are active now. And you can also see by default, if you are connected to a TPS system, we also lock the file to the ALC terminal. Now, how do I run this file in the TPS? There are several ways you can run it. In this case, a simple example is I'll just open the terminal, because when I am running, I would like to see the input and output messages. I can just say show target terminal, and then I can either just say step or I can say play. So what happens if I do a step is the very first entry gets executed and the output is displayed on terminal, and you can just keep doing the step. Or you can just say play, or you can even double click on these blue dots. You can just double click on this blue dot to set a breakpoint, and then when you hit play, the GI actually runs the script up to the point of the breakpoint, and then it stops. So you can, as a user, you can actually control the run, how you want to execute the input file. And one more advantage is, while you're running this input file, if you think that, okay, I do not want to execute the next subsequent entries, but I want to jump to the entry which says end transaction. So I can just place my cursor and say skip to cursor. Now I can say step. So the user has a lot of flexibility when he is running the input-output messages using the message run functionality within GI. So he can set the breakpoints, he can do a step, he can actually play, And one more advantage is you can even capture the input-output files, input-output messages. Like for example, you can say turn on the message log. So when you say turn on the message log, now if I go back and then rerun the same, you will see that all my input output are logged in a file, which I can later refer to. See, if you look at here, I just stopped at the breakpoint, and then when I switch to the ALC term log, it is logging all my input and output files. So now you can save this file for your reference, or for some reason, if you do not have the input output log turned on, by default, all the input output messages are by default logged into your output window here down, and you can always right click and say copy to new editor, and you will still have the input output. But it is not exactly in the same format, but it will still have the input output of all the messages. Right. Okay, I do not want to spend more time on this message run because we want to focus on the message substitution for today's webinar. So let me jump to the message substitution part. Okay, in this case, I'll make few changes before I. Okay, so this is a very simple input file, so which has a ZDSys, a very common entry, and we have a few entries which we use it for the demo purpose, an availability entry or a pair code entry or something. It's just for the demo purpose. There is no real data. So, for example, let's assume this entry here has some kind of a date, like January 12, 2015. And now I was using this script earlier, but now I need to change the date to the current testing, or maybe for today's date. But one way to do it is like I can just go here and then change the date to be today's date, like whatever it is, like 26 or 06, 05, 06, 04, and 2005. So, but it looks simple because this the input file is so small. You can always go and manually change it, and you're all done. Now you can continue to execute the file. But what happens? What if you have this input file with like 200, 300 entries, and there are several entries which uses date and timestamp? So it's kind of like a time-consuming process. One thing is you need to go and change all the entries, and the second thing is you need to do a search on those entries. And the third most important point is the accuracy or the error. You are always prone to error when you do things manually. So how do I rectify it? How do I make it automated? So in this case, I can introduce a date and time variable so that it automatically replaces within the input file wherever the date and timestamp variable is occurs. So it automatically replaces with the current date. So how do I do that? So once you double click and bring the input file to the message tab, you can always click on the message variables. Click on the message variables, click on new. Click on new to create a new variable. So a very simple variable is, okay, I'm just creating a variable called &a, but my value is like, okay, I just want to do a very simple example first. Just a text variable. So what does this mean is, if you look at my file here, it says on the top of the file, okay, the variable &a was created, and the value I need to replace is sys. So suppose I have an entry like this, where the &a, and now if I execute this file, you can notice that as soon as I step, instead of ZD &a, we are going to replace it with sys, and then it got executed. It's a very simple example what I showed. Now let's go back to our previous discussion. How do I create a variable for the date and timestamp? Right. Okay. Now I'll click on the message variable again. Click on new. just create another variable. But instead of manually creating a variable, if you can actually click on this icon, a small icon here, to create a predefined variable. So if you see, there are already predefined variables for the date and timestamp. I can just double click on one of these and say OK. So that's the format. So I'm already done with creating the variable. I just say OK, and your variable is created here. Now at any logical point, wherever you want to replace the date and time, if you just replace the date and time to be &b, and then try to execute this file, this &b will be replaced with the current date as of today with this format. Okay, let's just give it a try. I'll load this file. This step. Okay, now you can notice that I'm just highlighting the command. If you notice this entry which was issued, it was issued for today's date. Like it says, okay, 0306. Like it's that date and time format is a different one. It's like 006 and then 115. But let me go back to the same example again. So we saw how to create a predefined date and time format. But what if I do not want a predefined? I want to create my own. So in that case, I can go back and click on the message variable, create new, creating one more variable, click on the small icon. Instead, I can say custom date and time format. So I can click on custom date and time format, and I can choose, because there are different formats for month or for year or date. So I can choose this, double click on Y, year, and then I want the date, and then I want the day. Year, month, and date. I want in this format. And the example also, a preview is also displayed here. So now you can actually look at what format it comes in and just say OK. And the variable is available for you. Now, if you have several places, all you have to do is it's one time. You have to go through the file, replace wherever the date and time is there with &c or &b, and you can just continue to run, and it's all done. But when we spoke about this message substitution, I also mentioned that you can create a date and time, and also you can have plus or minus. So in this case, for example, you can create one of the date. Let me just choose a very simple format, this format. But on the right hand side, if you look at here, there is plus or minus. So what exactly this means is, when you actually replace this variable, it will replace with the current month and year, and it will also say, okay, I need to replace it with number of days or with plus or minus whatever the value is. Like in this case, I'll use a simple one. In this case, I can say I want -3. So in case if I have, instead of &b, if I have &d, and then try to load this file, okay, let me just change one of the properties to see what it was. Key, debugger. Auto send on select. Don't. Okay. Okay. Okay, if you see, it actually goes back and then takes the date and time and then subtracts it, and then it issues. If you see, the date was 31st May. Instead of 3 June, it actually did a -3, and it was like 31st May 2015, and that is what the date was given to this entry, right? It's a very simple to use functionality. So the user has the flexibility of creating his own variable. It can be a very simple text that you want to replace, like a ticket number. If you have a ticket number, you can just a 13-digit ticket number. You can just enter the ticket number and say OK. Or you can create. It might be a date and time, or it can be any other text. You can even enter the value by just double-clicking on the variable on the wizard here, and instead of ZD6, I want it to be like ZD6A or something. So you can even double-click on the wizard directly. You don't have to delete it and create a new one. Or if you think that you do not want this variable anymore, you can just highlight it and then just say delete. So it's a very simple to use functionality. I'm pretty sure it's going to be very beneficial if you are very much used to this, using running script with several inputs in that, and you are manually changing a lot of data before running the scripts. So this functionality with the GI will definitely assist in saving time and in also making your testing a lot more easier. Okay, if you do not have any questions, I would like to just make a few more suggestions. Like I'm again displaying my screen. Okay, as you all know that this webinar is conducted on a monthly basis. After the webinar, we will also upload the webinar into our website, and also YouTube. If you're looking at my screen, all the webinars are also uploaded to youtube.com/TPF software. In case if you have missed any of the previous webinar sessions, you can actually go and look at. You can actually go and look at the previous webinar sessions here, and also within the product. I'll go back to my zTPFGI screen. Within the product also we have an online help, where you can just click on zTPFGI help, and you can look for message run and message substitution. So there is a clear description or clear help menu where it's also well explained on how to use the message substitution, and even this will also assist for people to know more information about the functionality. And in case we also, when we work closely with the customers. Once we install this 1.2.9.0 versions with the customers, we will also do a separate webinar on the new enhancements introduced in this version. As part of that training also, we will cover this message substitution and also other enhancements which has been developed on 1.2.9.0. So, and once again, I thank you everyone on the call for joining this webinar. Please do provide your feedback, and we also appreciate if you have any other topics you want us to cover, please feel free to write to us. And thanks once again.